You gotta be kidding me! Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? We are back at it again today with another Guardian Druid guide. This time, looking at what it means to be a bear in a dungeon in 9.0. Hope you brought your game faces, because this one's gonna be a banger. Let's get into it. Before we get started, I'd like to take a second to thank the sponsor of this video, which is my Twitch channel. If you ever have any questions or comments about the videos you see here, or you just like to pick my brain about Guardian Druids or dungeons, feel free to hop in and say hello. They can create like a bone wave or something that they can... Alright, to get started, for those of you who may have stumbled onto this video and do not currently play Guardian Druids, let's start with a quick breakdown of their weaknesses and strengths before submitting you to the rest of the guide. Taking a look at their weaknesses, Guardian Druids are unbelievably limited in their defensives to magic. Since the loss of Mark of Ursul's in Legion, we have relied entirely on self-healing and survival instincts to manage magic damage taken. They also lack a strong grouping ability like DKs have with Mass Grip. While Mark of Ursul's and Typhoon can be helpful kiting tools, their recent changes to be bound to Resto and Balance affinities respectively have reduced their utility to group mobs and made them more geared towards purely kiting. Now taking a look at their strengths. Bear Druids have very strong self-heals and the opportunity for extremely high damage output as well. They have a sufficient defensive toolkit with the talented opportunity to create shorter cooldowns, which can help diversify your regular rotation. Guardian Druids also have the ability to be more versatile than any other tank in the game due to their affinity talents, which allow them to choose what additional role to tanking they want to fill in a group. Bears also have some of the highest mobility with regards to tanking classes, and that is prior to any additional mobility spells they might gain from exterior sources such as Covenants. The takeaway is that if you're interested in playing an extremely versatile tank that dashes around the battlefield to collect up mobs before overpowering them with cleave damage, while warding off attacks with rolling defensives and consistent self-heals, and then knocking remaining enemies back with a Typhoon or a tornado, while throwing out effective heals on your team before leaping back into the fight as a bear, well then this just might be the tank for you. As with all my guides, the information in this video was collected from the beta and Wowhead.com. So now that we've got that out of the way and you've decided that you want to play a Guardian Druid, let's break down their dungeon tanking by talents, stats, abilities and rotation, consumables, and tips and tricks. As I've already created a number of guides on ideal builds based around legendaries and how to approach choosing your covenant, in order to avoid redundancies and waste both your and my time by repeating myself, I'll put links to each in the description below for your browsing leisure. Alright, to kick this lineup off, we have talents. Now, as those of you who have watched my legendary guides know, each legendary will likely encourage a different, more complementary talent build to ensure maximum effect of whatever powers they imbue. That being said, you won't be starting Shadowlands with a legendary in hand, so this build is a great baseline to work off of and to tinker with as the encounters require. Starting with your level 15 row, you will want to take Blood Frenzy. This ability causes your Thrash to generate 2 rage each time it deals damage. As Thrash is your major cleave ability that is amplified by your primary 3-minute cooldown and also applies a dot that stacks 3 times, you have the ability to turn into an absolute rage battery, since in high cleave scenarios, every time it deals damage, either via the dot or on application, it generates 2 additional rage, and that is per target, mind you. Moving right along to your level 25 row, here you have the ability to dance a bit. A little of it depends on your talent choice in the next row, but most of it really just is up to your playstyle. If you're looking for more opportunities to kite out mobs, I would recommend taking Tiger's Dash, as you briefly turn into an actual rocket ship once every 45 seconds with this ability. If you want more help grouping up mobs, Wild Charge would be my suggestion, as it grants you charge in bear form and will help you traverse the battlefield quickly between mobs without having to sacrifice your bear's defensives to do so. If you prefer staying in the thick of battle and having an extremely strong heal in your back pocket should the situation get a bit hairy, then Renewal is a very strong instant heal, castable in all forms, usable once every 1.5 minutes. Now for the row where all the versatility a Guardian Druid brings to the game originates, level 30. This is another completely up to your playstyle row. However, the default I use for dungeons or weekly affixes that require stronger single target damage is Feral Affinity, so that I can catweave bleeds into bosses and more elite targets to help the DPS burn them down more quickly. For weeks that there are stronger adds than bosses and therefore opportunities to kite or avoid direct damage, I'll spec into Resto Affinity and focus more on healing so that my healer can run more of an offensive cleave build. At level 35, Heart of the Wild is really a no-brainer ability from your options. Though it is a 5-minute cooldown and therefore your uses of this will be limited in a single dungeon, Mighty Bash and Entanglement are just too niche in their uses to be baseline talent choices. However, they both will likely be better choices should you be managing a more CC intensive affix. But with Heart of the Wild being a direct synergy to the affinity talent you selected above, substantially increasing the damaging or healing abilities granted from that chosen affinity, This talent is easily dubbed what we gamers like to call an oh shit button. Your level 40 row in dungeons really comes down to two different abilities for two different uses. Galactic Guardian is easily going to be your top single target option, causing your Moonfires to turn into absolute blasters on 5% procs. And for more AoE heavy fights, Incarnation, which replaces your Berserk ability, but increases your HP by 30% and causes your Mangle to hit up to 3 targets instead of 1. Now, the level 45 row, in my opinion, to start out, has only one option, and that is Earth Warden. So much of our baseline build revolves around the beefing up of both the effects of and the effects gained from your Thrashes. Earth Warden grants you a shield to auto attacks for each time direct damage is caused by Thrash. During Incarnation, with Thrash's cooldown being reduced to essentially the GCD, between the rolling Iron Furs you keep up and your stacks of Earth Warden, you're virtually unkillable. As you can see in some of my legendary videos, however, there are incentives built into Shadowlands mechanics that encourage you to take survival of the fittest, but we'll leave that alone until the raid drops, okay? Finally, for your level 50 row, you want to take Rend and Tear. Again, we're all about boosting up that Thrash. However, Pulverize could be a nice defensive to throw in the rotation for higher tyrannical keys, but for the majority of your dungeon experiences, I would recommend Rend and Tear. However, it should also be noted that with the new Tooth and Claw ability, off-tanking in raid situations could be a lot more interesting for Guardian Druids, as they will finally have a reason to hit their Maul ability for the first time in so many years. The last time I remember hitting that ability, my Guardian looked like, well, like this. Yeah, yikes, right? Alright, moving down the list, now let's take a look at the stats. The release of Shadowlands brings a pretty radical change to how stats will operate through the implementation of Diminishing Returns. What does Diminishing Returns mean? Well, in short, the more points you have of a secondary stat, the less value each additional point holds. Currently, there are no penalties up to 25% of each stat, and obviously there will be a sweet spot for each based on what kind of content you're attacking. I'll put a link to the Wowhead article in the description below for those of you interested in delving further into Diminishing Returns and what that means for your class. As for Arcane Mages, I'm kidding. Yes, of course, we're still talking about Guardian Druids. Guardian Druids operate off of the primary stat Agility. Agility increases our attack power and enhances our ability to dodge and causes Iron Fur to boost our overall armor rating. For these purposes, Agility should be prioritized over all secondary stats, which is easy because that just means that item level is greater than anything. However, when it gets down to swapping pieces of the same item level to optimize our secondaries, you need to take into consideration the following. Versatility is your all-around strongest secondary, as it increases our overall output in both damage and healing, and directly reduces the amount of damage we take. After versatility, you have a bit more wiggle room. Mastery increases overall HP and healing received, haste increases attack speed, tick rate of your damage over time effects such as Moonfire and your Thrash Bleed, and reduces the cooldowns of your primary abilities. And lastly, critical strike grants dodge and gives your heals and damaging abilities an increased chance to have double the effect. With all that in mind, it then comes down to what your party needs more of. If you're running a build that allows you to throw out more heals after generating quick threat and kiting, then having a little more crit wouldn't hurt. If you're running a more traditional tank set, then your focus for your secondary stat should be Mastery or Haste. I tend to run Verse and Mastery for push weeks, since the Mastery makes self-heals and healing received more effective, which means the tank and healer should be able to work less to keep everyone topped. Now that you know what to look for with stats, let's carry on down the list to your key abilities and rotation. In order to effectively look at abilities, we're going to break it down into 3 main sections: generators, spenders, and cooldowns. First, let's look at our rage generators. First is Mangle, a single target attack for physical damage that generates 10 rage. Then we have Thrash, which strikes all nearby enemies, dealing bleed damage immediately and applying a bleed dot to all targets hit, which can be stacked 3 times and generating 5 rage. That's it. Aside from talented abilities enhancing rage generated from these 2 generators, auto attacks which generate 4 rage per hit, and just swapping into bear form which grants 25 rage, these are your only rage generating abilities. Now for the spenders. First we have Iron Fur. Iron Fur lasts 7 seconds and costs 40 rage and increases your armor based on your agility. This ability can be stacked, but multiple casts do not refresh the original. This ability should try to be maintained as close to 100% uptime as can be managed. Next we have Frenzied Regen. Heals you for 32% of your overall health over 3 seconds, and has 2 charges on a fairly short cooldown. Last we have Maul, and as I said before, this ability is really only used when off-tanking in raids just to crank out a little more damage. Seriously, don't use rage on this in dungeons. It's a detriment to your rage economy and is always going to be taking it from extra stacks of Iron Fur or possibly a Frenzied Regen. Now there is actually another class of abilities I want to squeeze in here, and that is your filler abilities. These two abilities, Swipe and Moonfire, are used when or if everything else is on cooldown and neither spend nor generate rage. Swipe is a good ability to get into the habit of just smashing because it's another AoE ability that just deals immediate physical damage on up to 5 nearby targets. Moonfire you want to keep up on all targets to help increase both threat and damage overall through its dot. It also doubles as a great range pull. The last abilities we're going to be looking at today that really make up the meat and potatoes of what it means to be a Guardian Druid are the cooldowns. As there's quite a few of these, we're going to go through these a little more rapid fire. Survival Instincts reduces all damage you take by 50% for 6 seconds. Barkskin reduces all damage taken by 20% for 12 seconds and prevents damage delaying your spell casts. Berserk reduces cooldown of your primary generators and spenders by 50% and the cost of Iron Fur by 50%. This ability is replaced by Incarnation generally in dungeons. Stampeding Roar increases movement speed of all friendlies in 15 yards by 60% for 8 seconds. Dash increases your own movement speed by 60% for 10 seconds and shifts you into cat form. Incapacitating Roar fears enemies within 10 yards in place for 3 seconds but breaks on damage. Now there are a load of other abilities that help you contribute even more versatility to a group, such as the ability to battle res, soothe and raging effects, and remove curses and poisons, all while staying in bear form. But I'm focused more on the core of what it means to be a bear tank. We can look more into the nitty gritty in a future Mythic Plus video, or feel free to hop in stream and ask me about the best use of any abilities not listed here. As for your rotation, it's actually a pretty simple one. Open with Growl and Moonfire from Rage to start getting your threat up and your dots ticking. When the distance between you and your target closes, Thrash so you can get your bleeds rolling, then Mangle for additional rage generation. These two abilities will be used on cooldown for the rest of the fight. As soon as you have enough rage to get Iron Fur up, do everything you can to keep 1 stack minimum, but ideally 2 rolling. If your Moonfire dots are already rolling and your Thrash is on cooldown, then go ahead and swipe away. If you should drop below 60% HP in the encounter, that is when you shift your rage pool to pop 1 single frenzied regen, as we don't want to overcap on the healing. But make sure to keep up your Iron Fur. It takes foresight to ensure you can do both, but it serves little to no purpose to heal yourself if you aren't going to keep up the defensives to prevent you from losing that health right away. As for your cooldowns, Survival Instincts is your defensive that is also your only protection against magic damage. Use it sparingly and wisely. 50% damage reduction is huge. Barkskin, since it is on a shorter cooldown, can be used to help beef you up before moving into a pack pull, since you have to get in the thick of it before you can start generating the rage for your first Iron Fur. Berserk is your big 3-minute damaging ability. Make sure to craft the pulls you make in a dungeon around this ability. I find it more effective on pack pulls regardless of the weekly affix, since so much of our damage is in the AoE, so make sure you don't run into a boss fight with this ability about to come off cooldown, as it would become wasted time or a wasted use. With the release of Shadowlands, Blizzard is getting back to its roots with professions, re-adding things like sharpening stones and the ability to enchant many different pieces of gear. I won't go over everything here, as there is actually a lot of intricacy in each profession now, but I'll provide a link to the Wowhead article covering some of the new consumables to be released in Shadowlands. I will say that what I look at when selecting consumables is first my stat priority. If it's an item, socket, or consumable in question that doesn't directly correlate to a stat bonus, like for example the new weapon enchants, I would look for an enchant that bolsters my AoE damage and therefore my threat generation. A weapon enchant like Lightless Force or Sinful Revelation to me seem like great enchants for a Guardian Druid, but again, some of it will come down to weekly affixes and your playstyle. Alright, last thing on the board are some tips and tricks I've learned that have helped me become a successful dungeon tank. This will be a consistently evolving section for you as you learn your own tricks or develop your own playstyle. First thing that helps reduce my reaction time massively, and therefore smooths out my rotation, is having the proper gaming gear. There are a ton of spells that, while not used on cooldown, contribute to a Guardian Druid's overall versatility. Abilities like Battle Res or Remove Curse or Soothe, that generally the faster these buttons can be hit, the less damaging it is to your group's performance. For that reason, I use the Corsair Scimitar Pro. With the ability to macro all those buttons and not have my hand have to fly across the keyboard to do it, I can get the spell out at a moment's notice. For the same reason, I recommend you use some mouse over macros for really any spell that you might cast on an ally in a dungeon. Not having to click their player frame ensures that you don't lose sight of your real targets, the enemies. Also, never be afraid to dive in and out of a fight. Using your strong mobility to dash in and out of a fight to either help group mobs through LOS or just reduce the damage you take for a beat can really help your healer and DPS out. Using abilities like Ursul's Vortex to set up a massive line of HOTS for your team, all while not taking direct damage, could flip the tide of battle. Lastly, find consistent players to accompany you into these dungeons. Whether you use forums or your guild or even random queues, get out of LFG when pushing keystones. This allows you to more fully coordinate with your team and learn the true limits of your class or abilities while allowing them to do the same. Having trust in your healer and DPS will allow you to push the bounds of what you are generally comfortable with and take you to the next level as a dungeon tank. Alright guys, and that's it for our video. Whether you're a novice Guardian Druid, you've never played one, or you've been playing one for years, hopefully you found some information in here that was useful to you. If you liked what you saw, please make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. It helps me out so much. The amount of kindness and generosity and sweet words I've gotten in the comments have been out of control this past couple weeks, so thank you guys very much. I've had a blast making content for you. If you really liked what you saw, check me out over on Twitch. I stream there pretty much every night from 5 until who knows when, except for Sundays, but next time I'll be live is going to be release. I'm going to be streaming release for a long time. So check me out on Twitch, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Remember, tell someone you know you love them, tell another player you're proud of them, and remember, we rage because we care. I'll see you guys.